Well, I want to put out this video, the New Jersey Firearms ID card and its origins, and it's going to go back a little further to 1966 when his Firearms ID card was first implemented in law. But I'm also going to go over Arthur J. Sills, who was the Attorney General, who really pushed for this in 1966, and a little bit more about him and his background, so you'll get a better mosaic of what the hell's really going on. Now, I have to say that this Firearms ID card is the absolute opposite of what the heck our country really fought for. And, New Jersey was an area where a lot of the battles for the American Revolution took place. Now, I know up north they seem to make it sound like all the American Revolution battles took place up north in Massachusetts or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, but much of them, probably most of them, took place down south, especially in South Carolina with, they called him the Swamp Fox, General Francis Marion, who was a guerrilla-type warfare fighter who fought against the British. Actually, in New Jersey, which they do not give any credit to at all, one of the main forces that helped the revolutionaries fight against the British was the Delaware or Lenape Indians, as they are often called, the Lenape or Delaware tribe, which the state of Delaware is named for. And they were the main guerrilla warfare fighters that fought against the British, and you always hear about the American Minutemen firing against the British using guerrilla tactics and stuff, and the use of cover and concealment. Well, the American native peoples were the ones that were really guiding mainly the revolutionaries, and they leave this out of history. I'm going to give them credit for that. And the other thing is, there was a promise. I'm mentioning this even though it's unrelated to this video, but I got a pet peeve with the way the American native peoples were treated in this country. What was supposed to happen in exchange for the Lenape or the grandfather tribe or the Delaware tribe helping the American Revolution was that they were supposed to be given their own state, which would have been present-day Ohio, which that didn't happen. They were betrayed, and the leader of the tribe was killed, and later on his wife, and that's the story of what really happened. But be that as it may, in the Northeast has always been an area of treachery to the max. I want to go over something else here, though, that this Firearms ID card was actually started with Attorney General Arthur J. Sills. Now, the interesting background on him: he was born in 1917. So in 1947, he was 30 years old. So in 1941, he was 26, right? So Pearl Harbor happens in 1941. The average age of the combatant soldier in World War II was 26. The average age in Vietnam was, I think, 18 or 19, but in World War II it was 26. So he was right smack in the middle of the ripe age to be drafted. But he was not drafted because he was going to school. He was going to Harvard Law School, which I call indoctrination camp, and he was also receiving his BA degree from Rutgers University prior to that in 1938. So he was also in the law firm of David T. Wellens, former Attorney General of New Jersey from 1941 to 1950. So he was a political cog in the machine, the political machine in New Jersey while World War II was going on. And other people in the United States and in New Jersey were fighting against the Nazis, including the Confederates. Believe it or not, the Confederate spirit was very much alive at that time, fighting against the Nazis, not as they are being smeared today as being associated with the Nazis, something I'm pissed off about because of the major media lies again. Sills was later appointed by the governor, Democratic Governor Richard J. Hughes, as Attorney General of New Jersey, right? You could tell this guy was a control freak because even though he claimed he was for civil rights, He conducted warrantless searches for stolen guns by 300 heavily armed New Jersey um, state police and guardsmen during the Plainfield, New Jersey Plainfield riots. This is during the civil rights movement. So civil rights people were looking, it was blacks, were looking for better treatment, and they armed themselves because of actually extremely brutal treatment by the police. So here this Mr. Civil Rights poser, Arthur J. Sills of New Jersey, the Attorney General, he conducts a warrantless search for stolen guns that were, it's not saying it in this article, but it was being used, they were stolen by the blacks to protect themselves against draconian control. This is actually the motivation behind the 1966 Arthur Sills Gun Control Act in 1966 and the Firearms ID card, which requires fingerprints, background checks, psychological reviews, a whole background check going all the way back to your birth, police approval at their discretion, witnesses and collaborating testimony or written letters from people that are of good character that could say you're allowed to have a gun. In other words, you're a compliant peasant. That's why you're allowed to have a gun, right? So that's the motive. Most people in New Jersey don't own guns. There are some, but not most don't. He also came under fire from the American Civil Liberties Union, which I'm not exactly on par with all the time, but sometimes they're right, for writing a memorandum in the wake of the 1967 Newark riots, encouraging state police to compile detailed dossiers on people taking part in the demonstration. So even though he was posing as a civil rights leader, he's not. It's a scam. He was also the guy that represented James Florio, the crooked governor. That's all I can tell you. That's what he was. During the recount in the 1981 gubernatorial election, he stole the election. The guy is a freaking Florio is garbage, man, big time. So just to give you a little history on Arthur Sills, he never fought in World War II against the Nazis. He never lifted a gun in his life to fight for this country. He's the guy that pushed through New Jersey's law with the Firearms ID card. He was the guy that posed as a civil rights person, but in effect what he was actually doing was he was giving more and more draconian control to the police, warrantless searches, and also he was compiling dossiers on people that were demonstrating against government policy. So he's a fascist to the max. Now, how did he act? What preceded this? He became Attorney General appointed by Richard J. Hughes, the Democratic governor of New Jersey, that became governor in 1962. He was appointed Attorney General in 1962, right at that time. All this was really on the heels of JFK, but the thing is, JFK was a totally different type of Democrat than these Democrats. Totally different. Totally different. These guys were fascists. Now, 19 years prior to 1966, when this draconian gun control law was passed, 19 years prior to 1966 was 1947. This was the third constitution of the New Jersey state. What it did, in summary, was it strengthened the role of the governor. So it gave the governor more power. Okay? So in other words, the governor has more power, and through his arm, the state attorney general, the state attorney general has more power. Consolidated executive agencies. So in other words, it's almost like what you would have in the old Soviet Union, USSR, where everything's under one hat. The FSB, KGB, or whatever. So he consolidated state executive agencies. So in other words, they'll tell you it's to save money, but the problem is, if it was to save money, they wouldn't have needed an additional sales tax in 1966 and an additional state income tax in 1976. It couldn't have been just to save money. If that saved money, why would you need to add more taxes later on, less than 20 years later? He reconstructed the courts under an essential administration of the state of New Jersey, Supreme Court, and its Chief Justice. So in other words, the lower courts were more ruled by one top dog in the state. The Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of the state could really put the hammer down on the lower courts and what policy would be on the way laws were interpreted. So all this preceded the 1966 ID card and gun control act implemented by Arthur Sill. Arthur Sill, in this time in 1947, World War II was over, and the whole game, even with World War II, was really a war designed to push us into totalitarian world government, and you could tell that the world government is all about control of the people, partly through gun control. But this gives you a little bit why New Jersey has become the communist cesspool it has become. That's really what the problem is. So anyway, so you got your New Jersey ID card, the exact antithesis of what the hell the New Jersey revolutionaries fought against. And if you look at that ID card, and also the New Jersey law in 1966, and the national law that occurred in 1968, later on, the National Gun Control Act of 1966, it was actually lifted verbatim from the Nazi weapons law of March 1938. Now, I'm an early member of the Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership. I have been since the 90s, okay? Now, I'm surprised that they don't have the other book out, still in print, Gun Control Gateway to Genocide. This is Gateway to Tyranny. But actually, gun control has to be in place before governments commit a genocide. And genocide happens a lot of times in piecemeal ways where the population doesn't really, at large, doesn't really see or understand what's going on exactly. Until after it's way too late. The actual, I could say that during World War II, the average German probably didn't quite understand or really know what the hell was going on in the death camps. And I don't think a lot of even the soldiers even knew for sure what the hell was going on at all. Because it's like you're involved in one area, and communications back at that time were not that great. I mean, it wasn't like people had access to social media and the internet like they have today, which I know they're already trying to put a clamp down on. But the thing is, it could happen anywhere because, Jews never thought it could possibly happen in Germany. They thought it was impossible, and it happened to them. Just like it can happen to anybody, though, to tell you the truth. But this was written by Aaron Zellman. He was the actual one of the founders of the Jews for Preservation of Firearms Ownership. I remember I got this book, and I got it years ago. But it's actually so many laws so many words that are in the law of the Arthur Sill Gun Control Act of 1966 in New Jersey were lifted verbatim from the Nazi weapons law of March 1938. Arthur Sills was good friends with Senator Thomas Dodd Sr. of Connecticut, who had a copy of the Nazi weapons law, and it was proven that he had it translated into English. Later on, in 1968, part of that Nazi weapons law was enshrined in the National Gun Control Act of 1968, but prior to that, 1966, it was pushed by Arthur Sill, who never fought for this country, who was going to Harvard and attending law school and working for a law firm during World War II, while other New Jersey residents were fighting and dying and getting wounded or suffering greatly and sacrificing greatly. And even if you weren't in a war, you were sacrificing greatly by rationing and other things. That he was living high on a hog with high pay as a legal attorney and integrally connected into the New Jersey political apparatus. He's a control freak, and he's a guy that's for gun control, but he poses as a civil rights advocate. Those type of people are the exact type of people that early revolutionaries in New Jersey fought against. Now the problem is, and this actually was exemplified or in the, well, I don't know if we use the right word for that, but it was highlighted in the war between the North and the South. I know there's a big propaganda up in New Jersey and New York that the war between the North and the South in 1861 and 1865 was about slavery and freeing the slaves. It wasn't. It was strictly over taxes completely. That was a political strategy by Abe Lincoln, partly to attempt to make sure that England and France did not join the South, because they almost did join the South, on the side of the Confederacy, because the Confederacy was fighting for the same principles, which was against draconian taxes, as the American Revolution in 1776 was. 1776, it was over a 5% tea tax. In 1861, it was on a cotton tariff that went from 20% to 47%, a raise of 235% plus other taxes added to it. So it was far more acute with the situation, and reason why the South seceded versus revolting, the U.S. Colonies revolting back in 1776. Now, like I said, my family, actually, my direct lineage goes back to the 1600s in this country from my father's father. And in South Carolina, they were fighting. My sixth great-grandfather was a captain in the Army of General Francis Marion. My other sixth great-grandfather was a ranger under Captain Wise's Rangers in 1775, and my fifth great-grandfather, my sixth great-grandfather's son, directly in lineage with my name, was enlisted in 1776 and fought and defended against the British siege at Charleston, South Carolina. So even though it's not Northern Revolutionary War, it was definitely 1775, 76, 77, and onward. Later on, they fought against the taxes raised by the North, and I went over that in other videos. What led up to that was a long brewing contention between the North and South. That the South actually paid between 70 and 90% of the taxes going into the federal coffers. But be that as it may, even when he had the war between the North and the South, Abe Lincoln used immigrants to draft which were the main ones he drafted, was immigrants, because they were more susceptible to the draft and centralized authoritarian control, to get them in the Union Army and fight against the South. Unbeknownst to them, they were actually fighting against what these principles that this country was founded upon, which was limited government and the right to self-government. That's what this country was founded upon, far beyond which sometimes the Southerners say just states' rights, which is, it's called self-government, actually, and limited taxes and limited government. But, the deal is that when this Arthur Sill Law came into being, it was kind of championed as a way to fight crime. That's bullshit. I'm going to tell you that right now, because really what the biggest problem is in New Jersey, the biggest criminals there is the government itself. And it's very telling that Arthur Sill, the Attorney General that pushed through this Gun Control Act, that never fought in World War II and avoided all kinds of service in World War II, even though he was in the exact age of military age, in his 20s, in mid-20s, he actually pushed through something that is controlling the people. That's all he did. He acted like he's for civil rights, and really what his problem was, he wanted control of the people. And that's really 90%. Well, you know what? That's the whole scam from the North. They got to play like the North fought, or the big powers in the North fought, the money powers fought against slavery. But you notice nothing's really changed. They were not fighting against slavery. They were actually, the North never treated the blacks anywhere near as good as even the Southerners. But they control the media. And the media will pick and cherry pick every story they possibly can. But honestly, there was a lot of stories back even during the war between the states, whereby General Grant had to threaten an entire regiment that would not want to fight alongside blacks against the Southerners because they were racist. Now the Southerners, there was a few blacks mixed. There wasn't like mainly, most of the blacks weren't fighting for the Southern cause, but there was some, and they were intermixed in with the whites, and there's documented evidence and pictures that prove it, and they were on equal pay, unlike in the North, and under equal food, and with equal food and equal armament. In the North, they gave them the shitty stuff and the shitty pay, and then they segregated them. So, It's like everything, you see when you hear about civil rights, it's a big scam. I can tell you that right now. Anybody's freaking talking about civil rights. But bottom line is, there's going to be a day, I think, when New Jersey, when it falls apart, that this will be the flag that's flying over the state of New Jersey. Don't tread on me, because the next time, I think it's like what the founding father says. It's like freedom requires eternal vigilance. Now, one of the problems you have with the New Jersey, New York area, and this was actually the problem even way back when in the 1800s, the Southerners, even though far outnumbered, were true Americans going all the way back. Not to say that they're inherently blue blood makes them superior, but this was their land, you see. They lived there, their fathers lived there, their fathers before them lived there. See, when you come to a new country, you're not exactly on with the stuff as much as somebody's been living there for generations. I'm not saying superiority. I mean, you could be some white French guy coming over here, or an Italian or whatever. I'm a half Italian. I'm sure, you're not going to be anywhere near as motivated to fight for the place normally as somebody who it's their land and it's being invaded. And that's one of the problems, even with the susceptibility of places in the Northeast where there's a lot of heavy immigration, like even in California has that. That's really why you can see there's an erosion of liberties in the United States, because people coming here usually are coming here for economic benefits. The land of opportunity, there's a little bit more that you can get a better lifestyle, more money. Now, other people have been living here for umpteen years, and they've been going back many generations. They have this instilled in them that this is their land forever. And it's just like anywhere. I mean, you could be in the Philippines, and somebody comes into your country, and you've been living your family's been living there for 1,000 years or 500 years. You're going to defend the hell out of that place, right? Now, if you're an immigrant, and I say I went to the Philippines and I became a citizen of the Philippines, I might not be as motivated to defend the Philippines as somebody who's a Filipino that is been living here forever. And that was the difference mainly between the South and the North in many cases. So, and that's one of the reasons a lot of these erosion of liberties have come about in New Jersey. So a lot of people, it's a very materialistic place too. That's another thing. It's a very materialistic place. And it's not thinking so much about what's right and wrong. It's thinking more about how much do I have and showing off how much do I have. That's another problem with it too. But, so I mean, I think, I can blame this on the New Jersey change in the Constitution in 1947. I can blame this on the appointment of Arthur J. Sill in the election of Richard Hughes in 1962, which led to the 1966 Firearms I.D. card. But really, you really have to really look at, why did it even happen that way? It's really because there was too much of an influx of too many different types of people that were like maybe first-generation Americans that really did not share the exact spirit of 1776. Because if they did, none of these things it wouldn't even start it. It wouldn't even start at day one. That's why I always say, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And once the camel gets its nose under the tent, the whole camel gets in there. Just like I was talking about the income taxes on the federal level in 1913. God, there were 1% on the lower brackets. And when it first instituted, World War I comes in, and they went sky high right through the roof. Now, my grandfather on the Italian side was a machine gunner in a 208th Machine Gun Battalion in World War I, and he was actually wounded by fragmentation. Now, he was an immigrant. Okay, he was born here, but his mother and father were immigrants. Okay, from Italy, and it's like, I know there's immigrants that fight hard for this country, and so I want to tell you that I do know that. But and he was very much aware that when Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed the Social Security Act of, I think it was 1933, that we had a national ID card with that damn number, which at first they said it would never be that way. And you know what? Now you use an SSN for everything. You know, matter of fact, the military used to have the military ID card number, and now years ago they changed it to the SSN. Everything's an SSN. Whether you use it for your phone, you use it for your electric bill, whatever. That's a national ID card, a national freaking identification number. My grandfather, who was Italian heritage, 100% Italian heritage, realized what that was. You know? Now, he was against that, but I got to tell you, though, I think part of the deal is, though, there's a lot of immigrants probably, because you know what? They don't even teach the right stuff to native-born Americans today about what the heck the Revolutionary War is about. You know, they don't tell you anything about Patrick Henry, give me liberty, give me death. They don't tell you about what even some of the counties were named for in New Jersey, like Warren County was named after a former medical doctor who was killed in the American Revolutionary War and fought in the American Revolutionary War. They hardly tell you this type of stuff. They keep it out of the schools. So that's part of their freaking problem too. But yeah, I think the whole thing's going to come around and it's going to go one way or the other. Trump's not going to be able to fix all this garbage, man. I think Trump is more or less the elite allowed this guy to win because it's to let off some steam from what they feel is a brewing powder keg beneath their feet. That's why nothing's going to really change that much. Because I'd said before in another video, you know, no Republican would try to even reverse this draconian gun control crap. The most they'll do is try to streamline it or some crap. That's the most they'll stick their neck out for. Nobody's going to say get rid of it. No, don't do. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. But I did have to tell you, you know, there's the New Jersey Constitution, which was the third revision in 1947. You know, in summary, was made the governor much stronger. His role is much stronger. Consolidated executive state agencies, so to put them all under one hat better, so they could be controlled from the top. And also the courts were more controlled by the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey, so that could keep the lower courts in line in case they were getting any ideas about giving freedom to the people. And so that happened in 1947. Then you got Arthur J. Sills comes on, and he pushes for this deal in 1966 with the New Jersey Firearms ID card. And you know, if you argue it this way, you know what I'm giving you some. I mean, I don't want to. I'm already being lengthy on this video. I realize it, but what I'm giving you is information you're not going to ever find on YouTube anywhere. I don't think everybody's afraid to say this. They don't write it anywhere. They don't say it anywhere. You know, I'm digging out what's really going on here. This guy that pushed for this Firearms ID card, he never lifted a weapon against Adolf Hitler. He pushed in Adolf Hitler's law into New Jersey law. New Jersey law is the embodiment of the Nazi weapons law of March 1938. Arthur J. pushed by the Attorney General Arthur Sills, who got his office and the governorship and the courts got a lot more consolidated power to ride roughshod over everybody else back when the New Jersey Constitution was changed in 1947. And here you get this guy who never basically avoided World War II. He was just making a lot of money in his law firm, okay, from 41 to 50. He was working for the government, and he was he's basically, and the other thing is the icing on the top of the cake. Besides, some of the things where he was doing warrantless searches and telling the state police to compile detailed dossiers on people taking part in civil rights demonstrations while posing. He himself is posing as a civil rights advocate, which is BS. The main icing on the cake is, too, he represented Florio, Governor Florio. People probably don't remember that commie bastard who used to be the governor of New Jersey, during the recount for the 1981 gubernatorial election. The guy was a, he's a crook, okay? I mean, he's no good. And, everybody knew this guy, Florio, was a crook, okay? Everybody knew it. And here you got Sills defending him as Attorney General. I'm like, this is, the main thing you could say is, hey, our Nazi-inspired gun control laws of New Jersey with the Firearms I.D. card, where the police let you have a gun if you're a compliant peasant, was all from a guy that wouldn't lift a finger against the Nazis. He was just back here in New Jersey making lots of money being a legal attorney or working for the state or something. I think that's what it was. From 1941 to 50, he joined the law firm of David T. Willits, former Attorney General of New Jersey. So he was all hooked into either to the government or the legal inner circles of New Jersey during the time of World War II and making lots of money while everybody else was dying and suffering, fighting Adolf Hitler. And this guy comes in and puts in Nazi gun control in the state of New Jersey, which, of course, that he much, like I said, he very much was good friends with Senator Thomas Dodd Sr., who had the Nazi weapons law of March 1938 translated into English. And then, since New Jersey passed this law, let's do something like this on a national level. See how enlightened New Jersey is? Well, you know what? I'm not knocking New Jersey here per se, but I'm telling you, the guys on the top are scumbags. And the problem is, there's such an influx of too many people from too many different countries and too many ethnicities that it's like, let's celebrate our diversity. That's the game they play. But you know what that is? Because when you got so many different people like that from so many different places, you can control them better. And the problem is, when you get first-generation immigrants, some cases, they're 110% patriots. But in other cases, the reason they came here in the first place is more economic opportunities. They're not coming here because they're going to sacrifice their ass off. They go somewhere else, or they'd stay where they were. You see? When you've been here and your family's been here for umpteen generations, and I don't care, this applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to the United States. I gave you the example of Philippines. It could be Russia. It could be, it could be southern France. It could be Sudan. It could be anywhere, man. It could be Colombia. You defend your homeland, man. And you defend what your homeland's about. See, that's one of the, that's the whole deal, man. People freaking, nobody coming here is being indoctrinated with tests about, what the hell this country was formed for. Because even the people that are living in this country, when you go to the John Dewey camps, what I always call them that, the John Dewey camps being the quote-unquote communist father of modern education, where the government indoctrinates everybody. They're leaving out all this stuff in school about what the American Revolution was about. And they flat out totally lie about what the War of Northern Aggression was about. They totally flat out lie about that. Because, the War of Northern Aggression was basically all about the same reasons England invaded the colonies. Enforce the taxes. Collect the revenue. So the Southerners were basically the American revolutionaries of 1861 and 1865 to 1865, which if you go back 2 or 3 generations, as in my family, they were fighting against the English. But they always got to put it under slavery, just like Arthur J. Sills claims he's a civil rights leader, and yet he was the guy that was doing warrantless researches against people that they were maybe trying to defend themselves against draconian statists, and also compiling data upon anybody that was demonstrating in these civil rights marches. So hopefully I gave some people some enough information to blow apart the scumbags that are playing dictator or control in New Jersey, and not just push them back, but push them way to hell back. We got to go right back to the roots of this founding fathers that founded this country upon. And I know a lot of immigrants sometimes are really on the ball with this shit, but then sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But honestly, the people that live here for many generations, they become so dumbed down, they're no longer of the same fabric as, say, a person that was lived here 100, 150 years ago or 100 years ago, where they realized, because even back in the 1920s, in the Army manuals that they used to give out to the troops, they specifically stated that this country, United States of America, was not a democracy. It was a constitutional republic. You'll hear every politician today tell you it's democracy. Democracy always leads to tyranny. And obviously, that's the problem we got. They're telling you, lying to you about day one. This is a constitutional republic. It's not a democracy. It's a nation of laws and limited government, limited taxation. And the only thing the laws are supposed to do is guarantee individual rights and liberties, and not grant individual liberties and rights, but guarantee them. Big difference between the way they're freaking portraying it today. But obviously, I didn't learn all this even in my better schools. I learned it by reading the actual core original documents that that people wrote back in during the American Revolution, why they've tried to form a more perfect government. And New Jersey is actually the opposite of that. Republican or Democrat, it don't matter. You need to really throw them all the hell out. Over and out.